The weapon defenses set us apart from everything. I think we're always going to be the leading front in the self-defense, the weapon defenses, whatever they are. I mean, we got hand grenade defenses, long gun defenses, baseball bat, axes, hammers. We deal with all of that stuff. That's always going to set us apart. I think us catching up with some more of the striking arts, just to be a little bit more, even though we're not a sport, just understand the sport more of fighting, the standing sports, the Muay Thais, the boxing, and absolutely more of the ground element is important to keep us relevant with everyone else.
Welcome to Unnatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nick Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
This is episode number 2. Today, we step into a discipline where ideas don't survive because they're elegant. They survive because they work. Mixed martial arts, close combat, and more specifically, Krav Maga. This isn't a sport shaped by rules or points. It's a system forged under real pressure, designed for situations where adaptation isn't optional and failure has consequences. Techniques are kept only as long as they remain effective. The moment something stops working, it's replaced. That's why this world keeps evolving, absorbing what's useful, discarding what isn't, and constantly adjusting to new threats. Weapons change, environments change, opponents change. The system has to change faster. In this conversation, listen for how survival favors flexibility over tradition, why generalists often outlast specialists when conditions shift, and how mental control, especially under exhaustion, becomes the real differentiator. Our guest is Dennis Amato. Dennis Amato's career in mixed martial arts started in 1999 at the first Krav Maga school in New England. Dennis quickly earned his instructor certification and became a partner in the school that eventually moved to Boston, Massachusetts. During this time, Dennis trained with some of the most elite Krav Maga coaches in the world, eventually working with them to train military, law enforcement, and civilian students throughout the United States. Dennis, now a 4th-degree black belt, focuses his time on developing the practice to cope with modern threats, mentoring advanced practitioners, and training elite law enforcement departments in the art of self-defense. Let's go.
Dennis, thank you for being here and welcome to Unnatural Selection.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nick.
I'm really excited by this because you and I have spoken about this. The premise behind what I'm writing in this podcast is the idea that corporate and organizational innovation follows the pattern of natural selection and evolution, with the competition, the threats, the opportunities, and all of it under a very fierce competitive environment, if you will. And so with that, thinking about self-defense and threats out in the world and how you evolve martial arts was really compelling to me, especially given how much I've learned from you in Krav Maga over the last few years. So just to level set and to start everybody off on the right path, could you please tell us what business you're in and what your role is within that?
Sure. I'm in the martial arts business. Krav Maga is an Israeli martial art. So my job is obviously teaching our students the art of Krav Maga. And as a business owner, I'm in charge of marketing, curriculum, lesson plans, training the coaches, answering phone calls, paying bills, cleaning the school, everything that comes along with running a small business.
Mm-hmm. And for people that may not be familiar, because you hear about mixed martial arts and people think UFC, right?
Yeah.
So for people, assume there are people listening here that have never heard of Krav Maga. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the history of Krav Maga and what it means to you?
Sure. Krav Maga is maybe one of the first, I guess you would say, let's quote, a mixed martial art. Krav Maga was born in Israel. And it started with a man named Emi Lichtenfeld. He was born and raised in Czechoslovakia during before the 1940s. So you can imagine being Jewish and around that time. There was a lot of racism and violence in his neighborhoods and things like that. But he was also an athlete. His father was a police officer. So, but he quickly realized that street fights and sport fighting were totally different. And And then when his father moved to Israel to start the Israeli Defense Forces to become the trainer, they developed a system that was based on reality, not sport, like boxing and stuff like that. It was based on sports, and then people on the street aren't going by rules. So they needed a system that everybody could do because they're building their civilian army. It needs to be learned quickly, which is something because, I mean, unfortunately, they've been fighting every day. So they needed a system that their people could learn quickly and actually have to go out and survive and fight a war. And most importantly, it had to work. I mean, you can say you're going to come up with a system and it's going to be easy to learn and you're going to learn it quick and all of this stuff, but they say you retain less than 15% perhaps of what you've learned in a real life violent encounter. When the fight or flight takes over and that shock of your body, what's going to happen. So if you're building an army, 15% is not good odds. So they needed something that would work, be rememberable under stress, something that you can just respond and not have to think so much. So how did they do that? Kept it simple. Just have a lot of it go. Your body does certain things under stress anyhow. You get stung by a bee in the leg, you don't raise your arms up in the air. Your hands would just, what was that? Would go right towards the pain or the sting. So essentially what Krav Maga would do would make some sort of move off of that natural reaction. So you're already 60, 70% there anyway. And I'll just kind of turn that into something that would make the move effective.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And so I guess from basic principles of Krav Maga, then, like you said, it's based on your natural reaction to a threat. You get stung,
Yeah.
you do a certain thing. Then what are some of the basic principles behind the elements of Krav Maga?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, address the danger first, whatever it is. If it's someone trying to stab you, you have to address the knife first, but by a blocking defense, for example. The second thing is try to attack as simultaneously as possible. Block and attack, block and attack. Become the attacker right away. We're not being defensive, even though we are defending. Keep attacking soft, vulnerable, fleshy targets that cause damage. And you keep attacking, overwhelming your opponent with offense until the threat's eliminated. Disengage and get away. I mean,
Yeah.
there's your principles, and it's straightforward. And the thing with principles is the principles won't fail you as some techniques will. If you follow some principles, I mean, a principle could be pick up a chair and smash somebody with it because that does address a danger of someone coming after you, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be written in a book, let's say. Grab the chair, pick it up, swing it over the shoulder. You see what I'm saying? The principle
Oh,
itself could just be address the danger. How
yeah.
can I
No,
address that? Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, more than anything, and this is why I've also been so excited about talking to you about this, is because to me, Krav Maga and many martial arts, they reflect at their core the elements of survival of the fittest, right? Survival of the fittest doesn't mean how many points you can win or how pretty you make it look. Survival of the fittest is there is a clear and present, potentially mortal danger. How do you address it in the most efficient and effective way to be able to make it home alive?
Right.
And
Yes.
so to me, that's, not only is it part of obviously the mixed martial arts, but it also has threads that play into areas that are in many ways also a mortal threat in corporate innovation, right? I mean, corporations go out of business if they're not the most fittest to survive. And so a big part of these conversations for me is like, how do we learn from where nature is its most brutal, which in this case, we're talking about human survival, and how do we use some of those elements to really pare them down to its most basic elements that sometimes give us an overview and insight into how we should be thinking about any other practice, whether you're innovating in biotechnology or in video games,
That's right.
and the mentality that goes into that. Because actually, one of the things that Krav has changed the most for me is the mentality. Honestly, granted, all the skills and everything we talked about that's all a huge factor because you could have the mentality, but without the skills, you can only go so far. But when we do like stress testing or the idea that when I first started, I would just peter out and get tired so quickly because I'd get so nervous when somebody's like laying on top of me and I'd start hyperventilating. And the only reason why I would keep going is because I would say, like, I'm not going to stop. But between that and where I feel now, which I'm much more collected, and I know that for as much as I think I have to give, there's always another like 30 or 50% inside of me if
Yes.
like the going gets really, really tough. And I learned that because in training, we push each other to that point where you just want to quit. But then like we use different mental models. For me, it's like I put myself in a situation where my kids are getting attacked. And that gives me the energy to just keep going until I just can't stop anymore. And that we say it in class all the time, that mentality around it's not the size of the dog in the fight, right? It's the size of the
Yeah.
fight and the dog. And that mentality, I think, is one of the biggest elements that I've taken away from this, and it maps into other things. Like when I think about corporate innovation in the fields that I'm in, I think who's got the biggest fight? And I got that from Krav.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And and I hear that a lot. I think that's the most rewarding thing. Because it's not like because I teach martial arts, I want my students to be tested out on the street and hope they get attacked. That's certainly not the case. The most rewarding thing to me is to see how it has changed and improved their lives. And that's what martial arts really is about.
Mhm.
The dental student who's struggling with their homework and or feeling overwhelmed and is ready to quit. And then I get an email saying how much the Krav Maga classes have helped them with their schooling and how much they're doing better and feel like they can accomplish anything. That will to fight and it's just to keep pushing and not giving up. So, that to me is super rewarding. Yes. So
Yeah.
thank you.
No, of course. Thank you. If we take a couple steps back, you mentioned Krav started back in Yugoslavia, I believe back in the 1930s, and it was very
Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia. I'm sorry, and it was a very pragmatic uh, kind of discipline. It was really about how do we keep our citizenship, our citizens, and our military safe, survive to be able to fight another day. And, the 1930s were, it was almost 100 years ago.
Yes.
So how has, from your level and at a high level, how has Krav evolved over the last 100 years?
Well, first and foremost, you know, em- before Amy Lichtenfeld died, he wanted to share Krav Maga to the world as a gift from Israel. So one may walk in peace was his motto. The idea is if you learn how to defend yourself so you don't have to. And but it was a military system. So for him to send it out, and it didn't come to the United States until the 80s. Um, so it had to be adapted right away from military to civilian. I mean, we're not walking around with M16s and things like that because, in the military training, a lot of the striking is with the weapon and, you're building like a unit. Yes, they do the punches and stuff, but not like we do in class. So right away, it had to be adapted to that sort of sense. The second thing that was most important, and unfortunately isn't around anymore, was how do you share it to the world and not have it be watered down? Like, how do you get it to be to different places and not have you take your own take on it, me put my own take on it, somebody else doing something else, and now all of a sudden it's not Krav Maga anymore. So that's when it first came out. I think one of the smartest things was Krav Maga Worldwide uh, patented it or licensed it. So it was a franchise. Like you couldn't teach it unless you went through Krav Maga Worldwide and got licensed. And that was a way to kind of keep it taught a certain way, the way it was supposed to be authentic and that type of thing. So that was how it started to kind of be shared with the world and to adapt like that. Um, and as time goes on, I mean, the more fighting in Israel, the more things that happen, the way that they would, let's say, for example, have a knife defense. Okay, now they're fighting and they're using it a lot, and people start to be aware of how, okay, maybe this is how they're fighting. So maybe the attack might change. So we would have to change. Or just realizing, you know what? This particular defense hasn't been as successful as we thought it was going to be. Why? Let's figure it out and change it. like the straight stab defenses were two different moves with the screw in the light bulb type of a moment. Well, it wasn't working. So how do we shorten that movement and make it more of the bring it out to the 45 type of a thing?
And I wonder, as I think about it, I mean, 100 years ago, there were airplanes, but globalization wasn't what it is today. So now you walk out in the street and you could bump into somebody from Boston just as equally as somebody from Russia or Taiwan or Thailand or any number of
Yeah.
countries. And so I would imagine that as part of the evolution for Krav Maga as well is both the threats and the opportunities evolved, right? Because now it's like the threats weren't so localized, which is like the people trained a certain way in Czechoslovakia back then, and maybe
Yeah.
they did in Boston in a certain way. Now it's like Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu and all these things started popping out of nowhere. And it's like, oh, we never saw that move before. And so I'm sure there
Exactly.
was an element of that, of seeing like, oh, okay, they've been doing this for 100 years. This is new to us. That's a new threat, but it's also a new way of thinking about things.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, you think about like, Krav Maga first came to be, when we first started saying it was like a mixed martial art, like one of the first. So what happens? I mean, Emi was a boxer. He was a wrestler. He was a gymnast. He had all of these different experiences as an athlete and a fighter, and he fought on the street. So when you're coming up with a system, well, boxers have the best punches. Let's let's make our punches like boxers. Muay Thai with the elbows and the round kicks and the headbutts. Those things are, let's incorporate what they do because they have the best in those. Aikido and judo, for the stand up and to the takedown stuff, there's that involved into it. Nowadays, because he was wrestling for the ground element of it, but now it's more jujitsu based because that's more prominent today. So you still have the same basic principles. It's just that each boxing's evolved. Even the way boxers stand is evolved. Due to like a Muay Thai, you're getting more power on your left and then your right. Your jab just isn't a setup anymore because they're standing more square. All these little things evolve. And I think what happens is they steal stuff from each other, each martial art.
Yeah.
Is that what it should be? For us, martial artists, I know it's survival of the fittest and we're a business and there's enough people around and not everybody takes martial arts. So there's enough of the small population for everyone to be successful in the martial arts business. And we should help each other if we're true martial artists, and we should be sharing ideas and we should be helping to make our public safer and more healthy. And whether they're learning how to defend themselves or they're being stress-free at their job because they have a mind-body connection that they never had before.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. And especially the kind of generalist approach of Krav Maga, right? Because in nature, specialized organisms often thrive in stable environments, but they struggle when conditions change. And in Krav Maga, balances some of that specialization, but it also maintains a very general effectiveness. And this is what I've learned from you and the rest of the crew there, which is that we don't square off like a boxer, because boxers think in very specific ways about what their sport, what it means to survive and compete in their sport. They're more bladed. They don't have to worry about kicks,
Yep.
their rules and so on. Same goes for karate, all the point-based systems, jiu-jitsu as well. You're not worried about getting kicked in the face and stuff like that. Krav, you got to be like, well, everything that goes into it, you've got to factor in the threat could be coming from a knife, it could be coming from a punch, it could be coming from a kick, it could be coming from a tackle. You've got to it's like you've got to be the almost like the quintessential generalist of mixed martial arts, because we're not working within a structured rule-based point system. We're working to survive any kind of a threat.
We consider ourselves, we're not a fighting system. And I think that's one of the things that gets very confused when people talk about Krav Maga. Well, a Muay Thai guy will crush a Krav Maga guy, or a Jiu-Jitsu guy will crush a Krav Maga guy. Well, in their world, yeah. I mean, that's not what we're training for. We're emergency room doctors. It's the way that I look at it. I don't have a specialty in, well, I'm not a brain surgeon, right? Our thing is just try to handle maybe triage might be the best thing to try to, we could have to handle so many things, right? We don't specialize in necessarily one area. We need to handle multiple different things at once. Like you're saying, is it a weapon? Is it multiple attackers? Is there's buddies involved? Is it, am I going to be tackled? Those are some of the things that we have to deal with. And if it's just a straight up fight, you leave.
Hmm.
You like to fight is ridiculous, right? You don't have to fight. The whole thing should be to get away. If you have to fight, yes, then we will. But like I said, that's where principles are going to start coming in. Maybe I'm not going to square up and fight a boxer the way a boxer wants to fight me.
Hmm. It's interesting also how, and I don't know how it works for other people. I can only talk about my own personal experience. Knowing what I know about Krav, yes, there's the element that you guys do teach it and reinforce it every time, which is like if you have the option to walk away or run, do it, take it, right?
Follow your pride and leave. It's better than
Yeah,
being in the emergency room or going to jail because you hurt somebody bad.
exactly. And so it's like there's that element, which is like the theoretical, which is like it's absolutely right, and I do believe in it. But there's always the ego. Yeah, I'm a man and I don't walk away. Wait, you called me what? Okay, we're gonna do this, right? And when I say this is because I was much more likely to succumb to that ego before doing Krav for so many
Absolutely.
different reasons. Number one is because of what you said. It's like if I can just walk away, who cares what this guy said? Number two is because he could hurt me. Anything can happen. Number three is because I could hurt him and end up in jail. And it's like, and
Yeah.
I'll regret that too. And there's also the element, which is that I don't have anything to prove. Like I go and get my ass kicked by black belts in the studio a couple times a week, right? I don't need an extra fight. Like I know how good I am. I also know how not good I am. Like learning to fight also has made me realize, and it's funny because I've seen a statistic that say that men overestimate their ability to fight by 400%.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they've run studies, actual studies in the US asking men how likely they would be to win a fight against a grizzly bear. And there is a very significant percentage of men, I think it's somewhere around like 30%, that think that they could take on a grizzly bear hand-to-hand battle. And
Have you ever watched
so
a professional fight with with a group oh, we got a pay-per-view tonight. So and so's going to be on. You got a bunch of buddies over or whatever, and you're watching the fight. There's always someone like that guy doesn't look that good. I think I could think I could take you. You know what I mean? Like if someone doesn't look like great in the ring or something, like they think that they could do better, or it's like no, you can't come close.
yeah, totally.
Right.
And so like a lot of what I've done is just shown me how bad I am, right? And so it's like, why would I want to put myself in a situation where the other guy could be good, he could be bad, but he could still strike and get a lucky blow. And so there's just so much on the line. And I just don't feel like I have as much to prove anymore by having learned what I did in your studio, that I think that's an element of self preservation and discipline that I've taken
The one
away
may
as
walk
well.
in peace. You learn self-defense so you don't have to. And
Hmm.
there's so many reasons why that goes into it. A lot of it is you're right. You know what? You realize, you're not worth it. You have a little bit of a confidence about yourself that I don't need to bark like the dog too loud just to
Hmm.
hope that they turn and go the other direction. You're actually putting yourself in more danger with the puffing up the chest and screaming in someone's facing when you're not prepared to fight.
Yeah. And also
Sometimes,
the,
sometimes too, like when those, I know we're getting a little off topic, but
no,
the loud guy is sometimes the one that you could tell is probably not the best fighter. It's the quiet one with the little smile on the faces you got to be careful with.
yeah,
The ones
no,
that do control their emotions and know, yeah,
yeah, no, I've seen that. You see these videos on YouTube of guys getting into fights and stuff like that, and you see the ones that are just like the cockiest guys often are the ones that don't know how to fight. And you'd be surprised because then you see them getting into a fight, and the guy doesn't even know how to throw a punch, and it's like, why'd you talk so much trash? And then you realize you stop and think, and I think about myself, and great that there are crazies out there, but generally, when you know how to fight, like you have less of an inclination to make it known or get into fights.
yeah.
You
Like
know.
how many, and not that trained fighters aren't criminals or can go out and hurt people, but for the most part, when you have trained fighters, they're not the ones that we have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you got to worry about people who may grew up fighting their whole life. That's different. People that have been beat up their whole life. That's another person that they don't care. They'll get hit. They don't care. It's a different person that you're dealing with. And usually predators are looking for the weaker person. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want the fight.
Yeah. And, right back to survival of the fittest. I mean, that is definitely they don't talk about the lone gazelle for nothing, right? Because lions, for as powerful as they are, they're not looking for a fight. They know that any hunt could land them in a mortal situation where they're not going to survive, and they're trying to do is eat. And so, yeah, it's exactly right. It's like the best that you can do is be prepared. I think by being prepared, you also convey that preparedness because of the way you walk, the way that you behave, the energy about you, and also the situational awareness. Parts of it is just like avoid it. Like you see the guy walking down the street with the attitude, it's like, all right,
Go to
be
the other side of the
confident,
street.
go to the other side, or don't act sheepish. Treat him normally. Don't act afraid. Keep
Exactly.
your distance. Don't go where he is. So there are elements about just like don't be in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
So now if we go back to just the evolution of Krav and your work within that, you've got now so many different martial arts to be able to draw from. And then society changes, right? The threats change, weapons change. How do you think about how you keep Krav relevant and competitive, yet at the same time also accessible, right? Because you're not training um, cage fighters, animals, right? You're training a police officer, and you're training a mom and a professional doctor, right? So it's like, how do you keep it into something that's relevant and helps them develop their own skills, but at the same time is still functional in a survival environment?
Yeah, that's the secret, isn't it? Like how do you adapt a program to suit everybody's needs? Different body types, different shapes, different sizes. And again, I think that's what the beauty of what Krav Maga is. I mean, Krav Maga and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I think, are the two martial arts that are so familiar. They're so different in um, the art itself, but the principles behind it is the fact that a smaller person can overcome a larger, stronger opponent. And that's what Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and Krav Maga kind of base their whole principles on. It has to work for the smallest person. So when you're working with smaller people and larger, a police officer or someone that's more athletic, um, it really, I got to say, it doesn't matter because of the way that we train, if that makes any sense. Um, how do you make it work for everybody? You got to keep them safe in class. It's not the fight. I think that is the most important thing because it isn't military. And I made the mistake when I first started teaching Krav Maga. I was teaching it like military. You go in there, the voice is very stern. You're just yelling, everything's go, 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 go. You're going until you throw up. If someone gets hurt, go sit in the corner, put some ice on it. There was a lot more contact and stuff that we did back then. And then you start seeing injuries mound up, including my own, and you can't train. So then you heal up, you start the process over again, and then you get injured again. And you're on this roller coaster ride that, okay, you get to a point, well, I'm super aggressive and I'm training really hardcore and I'm doing this, and then I get hurt and you got to start over. So it just becomes a vicious cycle. You're not getting anywhere other than breaking your body down, and you're eventually going to quit anyway.
Hmm.
So how do you make it? The second thing is most people only training for 2 hours a week. That's our best students. So over the course of 6 months, maybe you got 48 hours of training in. That's just 1 week of work. And you're
Yeah.
fighting to defend against someone who's fought their whole life. Street fight. I'm not talking about a professional fighter. So again, how do we do that? Again, keep it simple. How we train. Let's make it linear in a sense where if I have this defense, how many attacks can I defend with that defense? Can we defend 12 different attacks with this particular move? right? So now we only got to learn one thing to help us cover a variety of situations rather than learning 7 things against one attack, 7 defenses against one attack. That becomes confusing. Should I do this? Should I do that? Let's have one defense that'll cover 10 different things, right? Maybe a slight difference, of course, whatever the danger is, address that first, but everything else have it be the same.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And
And
also, oh, please go ahead.
and I'm sorry. And the one thing that I have learned is, we try to make people, I guess, Krav Maga versus a traditional martial art, because the idea is to be learned quick. So it attracts the different person. It's not the person who wants to do the 25 years of Taekwondo to become a master. He wants the here and now. So as coaches, like, we feel the need to make people black belts in 6 months. Again, that's where injuries and frustration and things happen. People just learning how to use their body. They have no idea what weapons they have available to them. Their hand, their palm heels, their hammer fists, their elbows, their knees, their shins, their foreheads, right? How do I use them and when? They don't even have a clue. You were saying people don't know how to throw a punch. It's a challenging thing to throw a really good punch. You'd think it'd be easy. So let's take some time and let's let people understand what they have available to them and how to use it first,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Let them be comfortable moving their own body. So when we do now start going a little bit more pressure, a little bit more stress, a little bit harder with the punches, it doesn't matter if someone's bigger or smaller, they have the control. Do you see what I'm saying? They understand what they're trying to do versus just go as hard as you can and just constantly hurt each other and break each other down, making people feel less confident, feeling like they can't do this. I mean, you got to build people into fighters who've never been hit, who've never played a sport before, who's never ran a mile, who's never, you want to keep them engaged. You need to keep it interesting for them. You need it to be fun for them so they can actually get to a point at some stage where they can be good
Hmm.
at 2 hours a week, learning everything we need to learn.
Oh yeah. And all with the constraints that it's not a point-based system. So validating if something works or not, it's tougher, right? Because, you mentioned before, you use your elbows, you use your forehead, you use your obviously your fists and your knees, your feet, whatever it takes to neutralize the threat. But that also it also means that you, for the sake of yourself and your training partners, you can't go all out. Like, it's just kicking somebody in the groin. It's like that's fully a valid self-defense thing in Krav, but that's not something you can test in a real life scenario
And,
when you're
and we
training.
and we used to,
Yeah.
and it becomes to a point where, you ask like how we evolve. For me personally, I've been injured and I hate seeing students get injured.
Hmm.
It defeats the entire purpose. You can't train and you can't defend yourself when you're injured. So the whole thing is, and then you can't go to work. It costs money, like the whole thing. So eliminating the injuries and trying to get away from those, again, when Krav Maga first came out, no rituals, no belts, all street, no tapping, all of that stuff. Really bothers me when you hear that stuff from people from Krav Maga. I think it's just, again, not having an understanding. It's not military. I can't just beat the crap out of you. Don't care if you get hurt. Go to the infirmary and come back when you're healed and we'll try it again. It's not about that. I think the martial arts today, yes, we want to teach people how to defend themselves, but I think it's more of everything you talked about earlier, just making your life more rounded, just being able to deal with adversity, change the way that you think about things, getting your body into shape. And then, God forbid, if you needed to defend yourself, you've learned that along the way. And you
Hmm.
have that tool as a benefit along with everything else that comes along with self-defense training.
Yeah. And how do so as you're thinking about, and I hear you guys talk about all the time in class, things like, well, we used to do it this way. Now we do it this way. Right.
Mhm.
Um, when you think about the things that need to change, how do you there's so many things you could, especially when you look at all the different martial arts, you look at jiu-jitsu and karate and all the other ones.
Yeah. So we'll take the bear hug, for example. There was a big one. So bear hugs. So bear hugs from behind, drop your weight, throw your elbows, turn in. Okay. So again, not really having a full understanding because it is a military. It's not a full grappling system, correct? So here we are again, you have people that aren't expert in a certain field and they're trying to address an attack to it. Okay. So now as Krav Maga defenses become more known, right? You see more wrestlers or like Roman Greco or stand-up wrestling will look at the bear hug from behind and say that isn't going to work. What do you mean isn't going to work? Well, let's test it. And I know my coaches would test it. Sam goes, he would fight with UFC guys, and that's what they do. And I'm going to bear hug behind. I want you to take me down. And when you watch wrestling, it's all about hip connection, right? So if you're not separating your hips from the person who's behind you going hip to pick you up and dump you, it's going to be very difficult, almost impossible to make that defense without getting dumped.
Mm-hmm.
You have to address the danger. What's the principle? Address the danger. The danger is what? Getting picked up and dumped, right? Or held so someone else can hit you. But let's just say getting picked up and dumped. So how do I address that danger? I need to separate my hips. Separate the hips. Now you strike as simultaneously as you can. There might be a brief section there because you can't do both at the same time, but you know what I'm saying. So there would be an element on why something would be changed. That isn't working. Back in the day, we just did trap and roll. Someone's in the mount raining punches. Oh, buck your hips, trap the arm and roll. Wow, that's awesome. So easy. Right? Till you get someone who kind of knows how to maintain a mount that's stand on top and you can't get them off it. Okay, so now what do we get? Well, you got to improvise that shrimp. You got to do the elbow escape, hip escape from the bottom. You got to learn how to do that. Because why? Because the trap and roll under violent situations with someone who's got a little bit of ground skill is going to be very difficult to pull off.
Yeah.
So little things like that. How people are hiding their weapons, gun threats. People get a little smarter. They don't wave the gun in the face and point it at it where it's easier for you to maybe control. They might tuck it back a little bit more against the body with their lead hand out. So now how do I cover that distance to control the gun? So there's a lot of different elements of why we would change certain techniques. We went from a one-hand gun defense to two-hand. Now, again, gun from the front, it was redirected left hand punch to the face with the right. Address the danger, attack simultaneously, right? Which was great. Until you have a smaller person going against a big person trying to redirect a gun and punch somebody in the face. What if my elbow is sore and I can't really grab with the one? And pretty much every other gun defense had a two-hand to it. Carjacking, gun on the ground, gun controlling with the right hand, so you need to put the left on it right away. So why have one defense not have both hands? And all the others have both hands. So let's try to keep it the same. Let's punch with the gun with two hands rather than punch in the face. So just things like that evolve.
Yeah. And also based on such practical theorems, in a way, it's like everything that you're saying right now also comes with clauses that you guys are very open about. You say things like, if somebody pulls a gun and says, give me your wallet, you comply, give them their wallet. Like, it's not worth dying over that. But if somebody says, get in the car, that's when, okay, now you need to go because the chances of getting found. So now this is where you do go for that gun in a certain systematized way,
right.
or the knife. And even in that, you guys say, okay, listen, you're probably going to get stabbed, but it's better to get stabbed once in a non-vital organ than 27 times in the stomach, right?
Yeah, and it's not, we would like to think you make the defense so you don't get stabbed. The idea is to have the fighting spirit, right? You have that thing where you could have the, 35-year-old fit, strong guy get stabbed or sliced and he has no will and can die. And then you have the 75-year-old woman who got stabbed 58 times and lives. So there's a mentality there. And I get it. I mean, getting stabbed in the heart and things like that will, but my point is that I'm not going to die. And I'm going to fight, and I'm going to fight God no matter what. So that's really what's important, is being able to turn that switch and have the fighting mindset. Because if you do get cut or something like that, you still want to have that fighting spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll ask you a question, which I don't know the full answer to because I'm only still learning. But when you're teaching people skills, you don't go from not knowing how to make a fist to knowing how to fully defend yourself within 6 months. It takes time. You've got to practice. You've got to learn how to make the fist. You got to learn the body mechanics of how to throw a punch, the kick, the knee, the head, all the stuff, right? And like you said, people are doing it in 2 hours a week. If you're lucky, maybe 3 hours a week. And so obviously when you're a white belt and you're just getting started, you're far from being able to use these things in a real environment. Although if the real environment comes up, you're a little bit more prepared than you were beforehand.
Of course, of
But
course.
one of
That's the idea.
one of the things that I worry about is if I'm ever in that situation where I have to use it, how do I make sure I don't freeze or I do the right things? Like you said, in the real situation, your mind goes through things, your body goes through things. And I see now as I'm progressing up, you guys do different things like stress testing and sparring. You add more elements to this to try to simulate an environment, in an environment where you can't fully simulate it because I can't go all out and start kicking my partner and elbowing them in the face because, like you said, then they're going to end up in the hospital and nobody wins, right? So
Right.
how do you make it so that people have to learn the basics? So there's an element of simulation because they have to learn how to throw a punch first. But then as you progress, you make this more, I don't want to say realistic because it's always realistic, but you make it more where you stress test it to the point that you're like, okay, we're going to push you to the point, obviously never to a real life scenario, but as close as possible so that mentally and physiologically you're prepared if something like this happens.
Yeah, because you're training your nervous system to react. So a lot of stuff that we try to do is just have you act. So think about when we go stand from a passive position, and when I say go or turn on the lights really quick or blast the music, you guys just got to go all out until we say time, boom, then stop, right? And then go, boom, and then make it have those sort of reactions. Or um our 3-2-1 sparring. I throw three, two, throw two, I throw one, bum, 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 bum. Right. So it's like I'm building your reaction. Cross hook comes at you. What are you doing? Right away comes back hook cross. Bum, bum, bum. So you're just not thinking. You're just trying to build reaction. We'll do standing passive, and you get slapped in the face and come back with right crosses gang, 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 to the focus mitts. Stand passive, right? Get kicked in the stomach, come back with punches right away. So again, just building those reactions out of people. But it takes time, right? So, and again, I think that's some of the things that I've learned the most to help me evolve is it doesn't happen overnight. People didn't have the luxury that I had to get to do for a job and train all day and go to courses that are 10 hours a day for weeks at a time. And, and put myself and immerse it into the way that I did and get to do it for 27 years. It's a little bit at a time. So I'm like, if you've never played baseball before, I'm not going to put you at shortstop and start ripping line drives at you and having you caught and having you make a double play. Like we got to start with what? The little short toss, 5 yards apart. Can you get it in your glove? And can you toss it back to me? And now if I roll it on the ground, can you pick it up with your glove, transfer it to your hand and throw it? Can you do that?
Mm-hmm.
There's a long way to go before you're ripping a double play.
Oh, yeah. And to you guys also, the other thing you say is, and what I really love about your studio is how disciplined you guys are. Not only in the training and the techniques, but also how you keep it organized and how you expect people to show up and show up with energy and enthusiasm. Well, not even just enthusiasm, but committed, dressed appropriately. And part of what you say is we push you guys not towards perfection, but we push you to do things right, because in a real life scenario, you're only going to be as good as like your worst training day or something like that. I may have mutilated the same, but it's something along those lines, right? So you're trying to elevate people in their training, knowing that in a real life scenario, they're going to have maybe 50% of that. But if you're increasing the capability, then that 50% gets better and better over time.
Yeah. And again, talking about evolving, and the more you're talking, the more I'm thinking about how much we have evolved. Because again, no belts, no rituals, no uniforms. So back in the day, I mean, and again, still most Krav places that you go to, I would say, but there wasn't really, you didn't wear belts, you didn't wear uniforms. Okay. You didn't do these little things. It's not a traditional martial art. They really tried to make it, we're not a tradition. We're not a martial art. We're more martial than art. They had all these different things that would really separate themselves on how hardcore Krav Maga is supposed to be. And then over the time you realize, okay, people are quitting constantly. Like, how many black belts are being made in Krav Maga? It takes time for black belts to be anyway, but people just quit. So it's like, okay, what is it? Well, there is no discipline. Just a bunch of people coming in, they want to learn something quickly and go home. Right? Where's the discipline? And as adults, where are you getting discipline? Okay, so now it comes to a time where we're asking you to have discipline. Spread all 5 of your fingers and keep your elbow low when you're doing a redirect of the gun. Show up when you don't feel like it today. Right? So we've never built discipline in you, and then throughout the course of your training, whether it's showing up on time or doing a more advanced technique, you don't have any discipline. Well, no crap, you don't have any discipline. We never built discipline in you. So over the years, yes, put a uniform on, tuck your shirt in, tie your belt. In lieu of bowing to me and calling me grandmaster when I come in. We don't have to do that to establish discipline. We are all adults. But line up in a certain way. Put your pads away neatly at the end of the class. Those things at least are starting to build a little bit of discipline in you. Get your registration sheet in on time when you're going to do your strike test.
Yeah.
Make yourself a better person throughout, not just being able to throw punches and kicks. And I think that was, again, a huge part of why I think we have such a great culture at the school too, because now becomes discipline, becomes respect. Now we start respecting each other. We don't allow the bigger person to throw full power punches into somebody's chest for 2 minutes at a time just because they get off on punching hard. Well, go hit a heavy bag. You don't do that to your partner. They're here to help you. You're there to help them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And all of this, it just makes me think about my kids and how useful the martial arts in general, but to me, Krav as well, and the mentality you guys have in the studio is to them, because again, it teaches self-discipline, respect, perseverance, creativity, and all of that in the process of learning how to self-defend themselves as well. And so, yeah, and I'm sure that there's a whole path that we can take talking about kids, training kids. It's a whole element to it. But with the last few minutes that we have, we talked about kind of where Krav started, the evolution of where it is right now, and you're obviously super passionate and you love the sport, and you love not the sport, the discipline, and so with that, where do you see Krav or the martial arts, but let's say just Krav, from where it's come, where it's going? Like, there are elements, obviously, like there have been big, almost tectonic plates that happen from my perspective, and I'm not an expert necessarily, but like school shootings, right? That started, I'm sure it happened before Columbine, but Columbine made it like a thing. Like now it happens all over the country hundreds of times a year. So I'm sure there's elements of like thinking about that or other threats that evolve. And so as you think about Krav and how it's shaped over the years, where do you see it going over the next few years, and what direction, and how are you positioning your studio and your training style to make sure you stay ahead of that?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's always adapted. We talked about that earlier, right? From the way we do bear hugs, because how wrestlers are more prominent and things like that. And as you mentioned, home invasions and school shootings, and not even just school shootings, just mass shootings in general. Um, Getting people, I think, are more aware of self-defense, especially with the unsteady political climate today. I think people are more aware and want to learn how to defend themselves a little bit more, especially with their kids. They want them to be safe growing up. I think there's always going to be a need for martial arts in the industry. Um, I don't, I'm not, I, it really depends on how these teachers see it across the country. How I see it, I mean, we're already doing it. I mean, with the boom of MMA and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and mixed martial arts, and, people are just so enthralled with that we have to start incorporating those sorts of things in our training. As you know, we got a full Brazilian Jiu Jitsu program at our school now. We got a whole Jiu Jitsu well, a lot of the ground curriculum for our Krav Maga program is a lot of Jiu Jitsu, because we have to be able to start dealing with that new, it's not, I threaten is the wrong, a new way of people fighting. Everything is going to go to the ground. We're going to go to the ground. We're going to go to the ground. We're going to go to the ground. So we need to know how to deal with those situations as well. So I think you're going to see a lot more Krav Maga schools incorporating the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, because in the beginning, they were very, got their back up about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and, well, we just won't go to the ground, and we'll just bite you when we get down there. And, these stupid things, which comes from just not understanding the ground. You're not biting anybody down there if you don't have position. So understanding that element more, I think, is going to be the big change, I would say, in Krav Maga. The weapon defenses set us apart from everything. I think we're always going to be the leading front in the self-defense, the weapon defenses, whatever they are. I mean, we got hand grenade defenses, long gun defenses, baseball bat, axes, hammers. We deal with all of that stuff. That's always going to set us apart. I think us catching up with some more of the striking arts, just to be a little bit more, even though we're not a sport, just understand the sport more of fighting, the standing sports, the Muay Thais, the boxing, and absolutely more of the ground element is important to keep us relevant with everyone else.
I love that. So, just with the final question, I guess, if you were talking to a bunch of kids or adults looking to get into Krav Maga or mixed martial arts, what advice would you give them? People that are like listening to this right now, being like, "Oh, this sounds kind of interesting."
Humble. Just be humble, and humble with everything. Don't be afraid to not be good at something, first of all. Sometimes that I'm not good at this technique, so you'll avoid it. Embrace something that you're not good at. Don't be an ego. Don't be that person who just bashes other martial arts because you're so proud of your own. Understand that every single martial art out there is valid. They have their own things that they're really good at. It really all just depends on the teacher, right? They're all awesome in their own way. It's just a matter of how it's taught and brought to the students. It's not the art that's bad. So just be willing to learn, because there's a lot of experts out there that are going to want to help you. I was so lucky to have people that saw my interest, saw I came from no background, and saw that I was hungry. A lot like you, Nick. It's just fun to teach people that want the knowledge, right? So just be that person that wants the knowledge, and you will have help from people that, are worthy of giving it, because that's true martial artists want to share their knowledge and help. So just be that person, and you will get knowledge, and you will get help, and you will even grow more as a person. Just be humble. That's what I say.
Love it. It's words to live by. It has definitely played into my experience with you. Dennis, I want to thank you. It's been a privilege to interview you, but it's been a privilege to train with you as well. I've learned tons from you, and I'm proud to call you a friend. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I appreciate it. Hopefully next week. Take care, my friend.
That was Dennis Amato. Now, Unnatural Signals.
Listening to Dennis, what becomes clear is that Krav Maga isn't really about fighting. It's about decision-making under pressure. Nothing in the system is precious. Techniques aren't protected because of history or hierarchy. If something works better, it replaces what came before, no matter how established the old method was. That kind of humility is rare, and it's powerful. You also hear how survival depends on changing the terms of engagement. You don't meet a specialist head-on in their strongest domain. You shift the situation, you combine disciplines, you create asymmetry, and suddenly the balance changes. There is another layer here too, mental endurance. Not just pushing harder, but staying composed when stress peaks, knowing when to conserve energy, knowing when to act. That control is trained, not innate, and it's often what determines whether someone finds a way out or freezes. And maybe the most transferable lesson is this: systems that stop adapting don't fail all at once. They slowly become irrelevant. The moment you believe your way is the way, you've already started falling behind. Dennis's work sits at the edge of that reality, where adaptation isn't theoretical, it's tested, refined, and sometimes discarded entirely. That's another piece added to the archive.
Thanks for listening to Unnatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.